in this discussion, I, Joan, in this discussion are fairly familiar to a handful of Catholics, but very unfamiliar to a large group of Catholics. And it is taken for granted that we are familiar with some of these terms. My pronunciation may be off. So when we speak about the Byzantine, and that's one of the rites within our church, many people are unfamiliar with the term. So there are a number of terms that, because of being unfamiliar with the term, the explanation I give may be a little involved. I don't want to use the word difficult, but involved because the terms are less familiar. So, but as we go along, I'm hoping that those who are not so familiar with the terms, will just take a little note of it and then say, okay, where does this? Hi, Latoya, welcome. Good to see you on long time no see. And welcoming those who haven't been here for a little while. Good to see you all, and especially our friends. Hi, Janice, number 3. Just to say, because we have 3 Janices, welcome. So let's talk about what everybody is familiar with. And it is, if we speak about the Catholic Church in our region, and our region mean the Americas, the biggest part of what we're talking about, it is very easy and a comfortable conversation because we know whether it's a Catholic church in Mexico speaking Spanish, or a Catholic church in Saint Lucia, or a Catholic church in any one of our Americas, United States, independent of the language, whether it is Spanish, whether it is French, whether it is English, all of these we readily understand belong to the Catholic Church, and we will say the Roman Catholic Church. Now, you may hear me more using Catholic in parts of the presentation and not simply Roman Catholic. There's nothing wrong with using the term Roman Catholic. But when I say the term Catholic, I'm now talking about all of the 24 rites. And when I speak about Roman, I'm speaking about the largest rite. So we refer to the Roman Catholic in some sense, even though there are Spanish-speaking Catholics in Mexico, in the territories that are Spanish-speaking. But we understand that they all belong to the Catholic Church. I'm making this distinction because as we go along, we're going to be speaking about our other brothers and sisters that are in some European territories that are Catholic in communion with us. Just the same way the Catholics in Mexico are in communion with us, and if we travel to Mexico, travel to Guatemala, travel to any of these countries, even though they speak Spanish, when we're in that Eucharistic celebration, whether we have an interpreter or we understand Spanish, we pretty much will follow the Mass, know fairly. There will be differences because of the cultural differences in one particular territory or not. So within the Americas, whether it's North, Central, or South America, when we talk about being Roman Catholic, we understand that all of these churches, we can go in there, receive communion, be a part of that church community. Straightforward. So too, the other churches, and the differences may be language and then maybe some local, and we see that because even in um, coming to some Catholic churches within the Archdiocese of Kingston, we go to one Mass, there are tiny variations, whether it is a song sung differently or something. But the Eucharist is the same, the prayers, the Eucharistic prayers are identical, and so forth. So it's easy to see in the Americas that we all belong to the same Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church. All of these churches that I'm going to refer to are in communion with us. However, we will see that they have, of course, differences in language, differences in their liturgical rites. And that's why you will hear us saying they have a complete liturgical rite for their own. So, as I mentioned a while ago, one of the larger group in geographical spread is what's referred to as the Byzantine. And let me grab my first slide and see if I can start with the two quotes. So there are two documents that I want to make reference to. One is from Vatican II, and quite interestingly enough, the other one is from Pope Leo the 13th. So this is the Leo before or present Pope, who is Leo the 14th, but he was from the 1800s, and as you know, different popes change their names and choose a pope to say what is the lineage they're going to be following with each of these popes, what was the background. So, quite interestingly, I'm going to be quote Leo the 13th, whose document spoke about the Eastern churches. So everybody, when we refer to the Eastern churches, these are all of the Catholic churches that are in communion with us, and we refer to ourselves as the Church of the West. These are churches that are in Europe, in Central Europe, Asia, Asia Minor, North Africa. Those collectively are and have been referred to as the churches in the East. And the minute you cross over to Rome and then go westernly from Rome onwards, the churches anywhere in those territories were referred to as the church in the West or the Roman church or the Church of Rome. So the geographical differentiation is a large one, very, very large, covering large geographical locations, but they're all referred to. So let's see if. So I'll start with these two quotes, and a part of what I'm doing, of course, is showing you the continuity in the traditions of the teaching of the church. So this I left off last week, just to give you an example of a Byzantine architecture Catholic church. And why I use this was to again demonstrate 2 points. Though the church belongs to the rite of the Byzantine, it's actually in California, in the Americas, in the United States. So again, just like how we belong to the Roman rite of the church and are in Jamaica or in the Caribbean, they too have had expansions outside of their geographical region of Turkey to now have branches or churches in the Americas, in Canada, in all other countries, and exhibit, of course, the universal nature that we speak about, that the Catholic Church, the word Catholic means universal. So this church, this picture of this church, was to give you an example of the architecture, of course, reflecting the Eastern cultural architecture. One, the cross, of course, on the steeples up there as well. Two, the fact that
Not
they're
see the
not,
picture, Noel.
Arlene,
Not seeing the picture of the church.
not, you are or are not.
Are not seeing the picture of the
Great.
church.
I'm happy when you all stop me, because then I know I'm not the only one going on by myself. Oh, there's a reason why I didn't say share screen and optimize. Thanks very much. Happy for that interjection. Let me know if the church is now up. The bar should come down in a minute,
Yes.
and you should be seeing the church physically now.
Yes, it's there.
Great. Thank you. So I'm happy when people stop me when I'm going off on my own by myself and leaving the class behind. So the architectural style is in the Eastern. It's the Byzantine Church, and it is in the United States, in Los Angeles, California. So it demonstrates our church. So simply put, if you are in LA for some reason, unable to go to a Roman Rite church, which for whatever reason, you can simply attend this Byzantine church, and though you will have many differences, it could vary from the language that they're going to be using. Their liturgical sequence may vary somewhat from how our liturgical sequence. You definitely will have a lot of incense because a point of their spirituality uses a lot of incense at all their masses. We do have the tendency to have our incense at solemnities, Easter, Christmas, and you notice that's when we pull out the censer and do some incensing when it's a solemnity. And sometimes now when we're ordinary time, we don't see the incensing going on. We incense at solemnities. They pretty much have incensing all the while in all their celebrations. So you could attend mass here. I mean, liturgical. They don't call it mass, of course. The divine service is what they refer to. One of the terms is divine service. I'll say that in a few minutes. So, but you would be in full communion and full fellowship, even though the language would be different, because this is the St. Mary Byzantine Catholic Church, is a Catholic church, a sister Catholic church of the Byzantine Catholic Rite, but in full communion with us, although there are language and cultural differences. So that's the first point I wanted to show, that the Byzantine Catholic churches have physically set up churches all over the world, for example, because they now have populations large enough in some of these communities. People have migrated so that they have a large enough community that they could have a church built to support that community in Los Angeles. And many, many examples exist. There's the same case in Canada. I took one of the other pictures out of Canada for another church. Let me just double check. And that's the point I wanted to make from that one. This is the Ukrainian Rite Catholic Church for those who were not here. Again, we're very familiar with this kind of architecture. The dome looks like St. Peter's. The church, we're more familiar with this. This is a Ukrainian Catholic church, which again is different from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And it's possible that one is on Main Street and the other one is a couple of miles down the road, and both churches exist in Ukraine. This picture was taken, of course, in the United States, in Detroit, where this is a Ukrainian Rite Catholic Church, Immaculate Conception Ukrainian Rite. So again, if for some reason you are close by, need to attend Mass, you can go into this Ukrainian Rite Catholic Church in Detroit, attend their divine service. Very, very different. You're going to, of course, be seeing and experiences that very different liturgical worship because it's very Eastern in their culture. But you'll be in full communion with those participating. So the point that I'm showing is not because it's Ukrainian, it is outside of Ukraine, in the United States, in Canada, in France, wherever they've set up communities over the centuries. And this is another Byzantine. This one is in Arizona. This is for those who weren't. It's St. Stephen's, Byzantine, Byzantine, and it's in Phoenix, Arizona. Again, you're in full communion if you attend the church. The liturgy will be very, very Eastern in its cultural presentation. So let's get to the two quotes. So our Universal Catholic Church, is comprised of, in its basic numbering, 6. And I'm going to try and show the 6 and attempt not to be very confusing in trying to show the 6. Those 6 cover, again, large geographical locations and many different countries. So it can get a little confusing. And this 6 is spread out over what we call particular churches. Key point to take from this is the core liturgies are in 6 categories, of which ours is one of the 6. And when it says 24 particular church, ours is one of the 24. I want to see how that breaks out. We're all in communion and all of these churches over the large geographical locations. So if I ask you, for example, as a first test, is Mexico and Spain and us, well, Mexico and us and Colombia, Catholic churches, do we belong to the same particular church, the same liturgical group? The answer is yes. And even though they're Spanish and we are English, we actually belong to the same liturgical Roman rite. So the language is not what is making the difference in our grouping because we all belong. But it's going to make a difference when we get to the eastern side. So we are the largest of the 24, and we're often referred to as the western part of the church. Have always been, and the western differentiation is from Rome traveling west in that sense. So there are 23 other churches, and all of the other 23 are referred to as Eastern churches or Eastern Catholic churches, never referred to as Eastern Orthodox, but Eastern Catholic churches. And as we will see, because each of them may have emanated from one of the apostles, so Peter was one, and we have Thomas doing his thing, we have St. Andrew doing his thing, because each of these traditions go back to an apostle, we accept that the way they do their thing liturgically is appropriate, authentic, and to be maintained. So, what we're seeing in the document I'm going to show you in a few seconds, the Pope at the time saying exactly this. The Roman Church, although it has spread in the Americas, for example, bringing the particular way, the Western side, the Roman side of the church, to the countries in Central South America. We're going to be seeing it saying, those liturgical rites of the Eastern Church are to be respected and used and maintained as they have passed them on for the 2,000 years that they have been passed on. If I say anything that sounds contradictory, do let me know. So Eastern churches, as I said, go all the way back. They will have some variations to the Latin Church, but they are equally valid and they're in full agreement in our essential doctrines, those critical. So we can receive our sacraments and attend we call it the sacrifice of the Mass, the Eucharist, Blessed Sacrament. Some of the Eastern churches refer to it as the divine liturgy. So if you hear the word divine liturgy, it's the same thing as the Holy Mass. And in each of this, the Coram Bono, each of these are how they have translated it in their own language. But it's divine liturgy in the Eastern churches. So I'll say again, the church I showed you in Phoenix a while ago, it's the Eastern Divine Liturgy, even though it's in the United States or in Phoenix or the one in California, it's referred to as Divine Liturgy. At the same time, we can attend the Divine Liturgy and receive the communion without any variation, without doing any, because they're in full communion with us. So if we attend Mass, that's the last line here, so we have sent out these notes. If we attend Mass at any of these divine liturgies, we are participating in a fully Catholic celebration, which is of equal celebration to ours. Whether it's in a language that we understand or not. We're participating. Hopefully we can get some translation. So here is the earlier document that I made mention to. And from you see the word Orientum, and of course I have no strong background in Latin or church history. So you notice the Orientium part, Oriental. And this is the dignity of the Oriental churches of the East. So in 1894, this is, the period after Vatican I, Pope Leo the 13th, for those who came in late, this is the Pope Leo before this current Pope Leo. Notice how much 100 years has passed. The 13th, he put out this apostolic letter clarifying that the Eastern churches, all of them that are in communion with us, the Eastern churches of the East are worthy of the glory and reverence that they hold throughout the whole of Christendom in virtue of those extremely ancient, they go back the same 2,000 years, singular memorials that they celebrate that have been bequeathed and passed on to us together. For it was in that part of the world, the Pope continues, that the first actions for the redemption of human race began, meaning Christ grew up in Jerusalem, and the early apostles and the disciples of those apostles went out to these regions and established these churches. And they are in accord with all kinds of plan of God. So obviously the Pope here is emphasizing that the Roman rite is equal to all the other rites in reverence and is not to be understood that ours is senior and theirs junior. They have equal because they were established by one of the apostles that Jesus sent out, just the same way he sent out Peter, and the same way he sent out Paul. And both of those culminated ministries in Rome. And hence, that's a part of the understanding of the growth and the development of the church's leadership being established in Rome at the same time while there's a church in Jerusalem. We'll see that in a few minutes. So that's 1894. In 1964, the period of the Vatican II, this is one of the Vatican II documents again, so that Orientalium comes back again, and Ecclesiarium, the decree of the Eastern Catholic Churches. So here Pope Paul, St. Pope Paul VI, and of course, a quick aside, that when St. John Paul took the names of United John and Paul, he was, of course, going back to the St. Paul, and the long line of traditions of Pauls who had come before and now united with John's and then having the John Paul together. And he was saying the same kind of apostolic ministry that Paul was known for, that's what he had been known for, similar John, the Apostle John. So when they choose names, it's showing that that is a focus of their particular Holy See. And his point here in 1964, reaffirming, of course, what had been said by Leo the 13th. The Catholic Church holds in high esteem the institutions, liturgical rites, which means their baptismal rite, their Eucharistic rite, their ordination rites, all of that composite into one big rite. Their church ecclesia, Spanish, familiar, church, their church traditions, and the established standards of the Christian life of the Eastern churches. For in them, distinguished as they are for their venerable antiquity, they go back all the way back for the 2,000 years, venerable antiquity. There remains conspicuous a tradition that has been handing down from the apostles through the fathers. So Pope Paul is reaffirming that we trace our tradition back to Peter. Each of these Eastern churches traces their tradition back to one of the other apostles, and hence it's venerable, it's long, it's revered for the same 2,000 years, going back to the early, and they are in full communion with us. They're not competing with us, and there is no quote unquote. Have there been quote unquote separation and breakaways of some of these churches over the centuries? The answer is yes. And we see some of them reuniting again and accepting the Catholic Church. So you'll see that in a more historical setting. I'm hoping this diagram will help first to establish by physical location and then by influence. So what is this diagram saying? Headquarters, Jerusalem, where the disciples started, and James was the first bishop in Jerusalem. Also, at the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, Christians then migrated to other regions very, very early in Christianity, 60, 70, 30 years after Jesus' death. While, of course, the early church had already been spreading, the Pentecost event was about 45 onwards. Sorry, not 45. The Council of Jerusalem was what I wanted to refer to. The church had already been established by the time Paul is writing his letters to Timothy. He speaks about bishops and episcopi. So they had already started to establish bishops in the churches that Paul founded, Peter founded. So we see a number of, if you want to call them, established headquarters developing very, very early. And of course, Jerusalem, Rome, Antioch, which is modern day Syria. And hence you will see many of the churches referring to as Syriac, Syriac. And this is very important. So the Antioch church is in Syria. Alexandria church is in Egypt, which is North Africa. And we see under each of these branches, which now grow into large geographical locations. So the easiest one to speak about is the one we are familiar with, which is the Latin Rite, the Roman Rite. We know today that it is established throughout the world, Central, South America, United States, Europe, the Latin side of the church. Whether it's in French, German, the languages exist, and it's a Roman Rite that they all participate in. Full stop. That's a Roman Rite. The Antioch, we'll see the Syria, because Antioch is in Syria. We'll see there's East and West. And also what's referred to as a Cappadocian. We'll oftentimes hear about priests, the Cappadocian priests. Under the Cappadocian, we will now see the influence into the Byzantine, which I just spoke about as one of the churches. Skip over on the other side, so just focus on the large churches. So Alexandria in Egypt influences and has more than the church in Egypt. The word Coptic is both the Greek and other languages, meaning Egyptian. But under that rite are also the other African countries that developed early Christian churches. So we have the Coptic, which is Egypt, the Ethiopian as well, and Eritrean, and those two are going to be close for a while. So in this diagram, I'm attempting to show the overarching rites, and then within each of these rites, what you're going to see, they spread geographically. The largest one was spread, of course, largest geographical location is a Roman Rite, the Roman Catholic Rite, which covers, as I said, all of the territories that we know Catholicism came to and has spread over that time period. During that same time period, we see the Byzantine, which is now the Constantinople, which is in Turkey, and that influencing a large number of geographical regions, but they are referred to as the Byzantine, collectively, like how we are referred to as the Roman Rite, even though it covers a large number of countries. So the Byzantine is a rite, but it covers Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Croatia, you, Romania, Armenia, Macedonia, Albania, the Greek. So the geographical spread of the Byzantine is a large geographic spread, just as how the Roman Rite is an extremely large geographical spread. So that's what I want you to take from the large groupings are going to be under the Roman or Latin Rite, Cappadocian or Constantinopolitan under the Byzantine Rite. So that's 2 of the 6. The Alexandrian, that's a 3rd. The Syriac actually is now branched into both the East and the West. And if you remember Abraham, Father Abraham, he was born in Ur, and you'll hear the term of the Chaldeans. You will hear that same word coming up when we speak about the eastern side. Chalcedon, Chaldean, same location geographically and cultural. So the Syriac liturgy is broken into the east and west, and there's a difference between the two. And of course, there's the Jerusalem church. That's the general. Now, let me say 2 more things on this slide, which will add a little bit of confusion. So under our rite, the Roman Rite, there are actually 3 rites which are under the Roman Rite. The Latin, which is what we're very, very, very familiar with. And of course, within the Latin, now we have the traditional Latin Mass and the Nudus Ordo, the new Mass or Mass, which is in many, 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 many languages across the world. There is equal to us the Ambrosian Rite, which is a part of the Latin Rite, and it's developed by Saint Ambrose, a very, very influential. We'll see this in a few seconds. So under the Roman Rite, there are actually 3 different rites in the Roman Rite. And in a sense, it's not language-based. It's actually derivative from a influential source like Saint Ambrose. So we'll see that in a little more. So when we speak about the Roman, the Antioch, Alexandrian, the Byzantine, that's where we now will have this expansion of the next 23 particular churches, whereas the Roman is one of the 24 particular. And I'll just leave it at that for now. So this is a same diagram, just laid out a little bit different. Establishing again the Roman Rite has the Ambrosian, the Mozarabic, which is out of Spain, and the Roman Rite as what we call the Latin Rite. Antioch, Syrian, has the West and the East as 2 separate, and again, what's referred to as the Cappadocian branches into Armenian and the Byzantine is all of those European churches. all of these churches are Catholic. And of course, up there is again the African churches, which is the Alexandrian Church, um, which has the Coptic, Ethiopian, and the Eritrean, and further branches out. And yes, so this is what I want to do. And then I'll take a break and see if we take some questions there. I can't pronounce half of the words in the list, so work with me as best as I can. And just to say, as again, I'm a biblical background. I'm doing my best to try and mediate the context. I forgot to take off the ability that people have that they can. So don't touch your screens, everybody. You may accidentally touch the markers on the screen, and it's going to be difficult for me to remove it. So the first rite we discussed a while ago is there's a Latin rite, and that's our Roman Catholic, right? The Alexandria is in Egypt generally, but it is, of course, composite of Coptic, which is Egyptian, Eritrean, and Ethiopia. And of course, again, these countries are spread out over distances. They're not right close exactly beside each other. They're spread out. One is in East Africa, the other one is in North Africa. The Antioch, referred to as the Western Syriac Rite. You hear of the Maronite Church. There is the Maronite churches, Catholic churches, the Syriac, and very, very interesting, the Syro Malana. I'm sure Joan could help pronounce this. Kara Catholic Church. These have very, very long traditions and are associated. The Armenian Rite again, and then now the Eastern Syrian. So that was the West a while ago. The Eastern have the Chaldean Church and the Syro Malabar, which is a little different from the other one. And they've had differences, and that's why they actually split into East and West historically. So these are all rites within the Catholic Church. Now, this is now a list of those Byzantine or Constantinopolitan. So you recognize the term Constantinopolitan because the Nicene Creed sometimes is called the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed. It was in Constantinople that they established a few points in the creed as well. But both are the same territory of Constantinople, and so it's all under the Byzantine. So all of these countries in Europe, in these territories, have Catholic churches, and they all belong to the Byzantine Rite. Again, I remind you, if you came in late, there are also Orthodox churches in these countries. They are not the same church. The Orthodox churches exist there, and our Eastern Catholic Church, so the Albanian Catholic, Belarusian, notice, Bulgarian, all of these have Catholic churches under the Byzantine Rite. Their liturgy is very Eastern, lots of incense, lots of traditions in the Eastern Rite. There's a Greek, Byzantine, Hungarian, Italo-Albanian, Macedonian, Romanian, Russian. Each of these belong to us and are in sister and brothers to us as Catholic churches. Slovak, Ukrainian. So they have all of these European countries, and I'd put a diagram in here, but I'll skip over the diagram for the second, because I think I have a European diagram. Same diagram I showed a while ago, and again the emphasis here, each of these, Jerusalem, Rome, Antioch, Alexandria, is a particular church. All right, a little more detail. So our Latin Rite, we attribute back to St. Peter from very early days. Our correct Eucharistic liturgy was handed down from as early as the 4th century. There have been variations with it. Some of the key elements have remained the same, though. in light of the scriptural background to them. But there have been variations. Sometimes there wasn't a homily, and sometimes they put back the homily, etc., etc. Another discussion for a longer presentation. But just to say, the Latin rite goes back as early as the 300s. So this was a liturgy used in Rome. There were other liturgies used in the West up until the Council of Trent in the 1500s. And then after the Council of Trent, the Roman liturgy became established as the tradition that the church in the West would hold on to. Now, again, what is the other Latin? As we're going to see in a few seconds, the Saint Ambrosian also exists. So, and this explains why later on the popes would come along to say the other Eastern rites traditions are of equal value as the Latin rite. So the Patriarch of the West, the Pope is vicar, and all of these are in communion with him. As we will now see, there are those other rites, and they go back as early again as the 4th century. So what are they? The Masoretic rite, and this originated in Spain. The Saint Ambrosian, the Ambrosian rite from Italy, from Saint Ambrose, he's in the 300s. And the Bragan rite from Portugal, and this is traditionally celebrated with Dominicans, Carmelites, and Carthusian orders because of their historical. Again, all of these are in full communion with us. Although the Eastern rites have their own, they also have their own code of canon law. So they have and develop their code of canon law. They are completely equal in dignity with the rites. So we are, quote unquote, different in some of our aspects, but united in agreement on our faith perspective and accept the Pope as the singular leader. And I just going to do this one as well. So lots more history than biblical stuff here. So the Byzantine, as I pointed out, of the Eastern churches, this is the largest. This is based on the liturgy we believe developed by St. James, and it comes from the Antiochian church. And later on, additions were done by St. Basil in the 300s and St. John Chrysostom, two significant early church fathers. Well worth reading and learning about them. Maybe I'll get somebody to come and do some presentation on these early church fathers, their development to our theology, our understanding, our liturgy, major contributors. So again, the Eastern Church has been influenced by some of their Greek philosophical thinking. Later on, we may touch on that again. This liturgy is similar, if not identical, to the liturgy used by Orthodox churches. It shows a greater resemblance, lots of incense use, and what is common here is the cultural practices. And how I'd best say it is, again, use the example I did before. Maybe when we go to Spanish churches who are Catholic, we see many things that are very similar in those Spanish churches, which are not similar culturally to our English-speaking or even our Jamaican churches. This is the commonality that the Orthodox and the Eastern churches have, that their dress code are very similar in style and design, use of incense, many similarities, and hence it's easy to think they are and belong to the same thing. I'll soon show you a picture of, again, the Eastern churches. After the breakaway of 1054, so a schism, SCHISM, is when there is a breaking with a major hold on teachings, and the difference can be on the question of leadership as against the question of theological matters. So we don't necessarily refer to when the breakaway by Calvin and Luther as a schism, because their breakaway was on theological questions and not singularly do we agree with the Pope or not, which is also a question that some of them had as well. So a schism is when practically a lot of the teachings remain the same, and it's a leadership is one of the issues that is in. So in 1054 is when the Orthodox churches broke away, and of course, a central point for them was in Constantinople and the Eastern churches. So all these Eastern churches that we refer to them, the term we use is a congregation for the Oriental churches. And that I'm not sure if that has changed since. There's reason it may have changed under one or two popes, but it's called because we had the congregation for the divine, for liturgies, we had congregation for the teachings. So their leadership is either a patriarch, and these are the ones in the Catholic Church now. They're referred to as patriarchs, a major archbishop, or a metropole. So you could have heard about the metropole in Jerusalem, who is the Catholic. If it's in, that part of the region, you may have heard a metropole and not necessarily an archbishop. Those terms are the leadership in that particular church rite. So it can be a patriarch, it can be a major archbishop, and it can be a metropole, a metropolitan. And as I said before now, the Byzantine covers a large geographical area, and I mentioned them a while ago. Albania, Belarus, Bulgaria, Croatia, Hungary, Romania, Russia, Ukraine. So all of these, I'd say many of us are familiar with them having the Orthodox churches. They are also Catholic churches. And of course, we don't refer to them as Roman Catholic because they belong to their own rites. And each of these belong to the rite, the Byzantine rite. And there is the map I included. If you can see it, I just wanted to give you an idea of the geographical spread of these churches. So you see Ukraine in the middle of the map, Belarus right above it, Romania below it. So early apostles traveled to a number of these territories, some of their disciples, and then subsequent other successors, early church fathers, traveled to all of these various regions and established churches from this long tradition. And we hold that these traditions are. So modern day Turkey, down below that, is where we're going to have the large group that we're speaking about as well there. And then the Syrian church is down there. Iraq is a Chaldean church. And then North Africa, we see Egypt there. And then off the map is, of course, Ethiopia, which is more to the east. Christianity spread to all of these regions. Subsequently, there was also the invasion or taking over by the Muslims, which came in the 700s. So many of these countries also had been taken over by the Muslims, including Spain. So that was just to give you a kind of summary chart to show you the major centers. The Byzantine, as we just reviewed a while ago, lots of European countries associated with at least St. James or one other of the apostles and their disciples. The Antiochian, the Maronite, Chaldean, Malabar, so that's east and west together. The Roman Rite, Alexandrian, as in Egypt. And let's take questions. So, as I said, here is a picture of the Eastern churches when they were in attendance in Rome. And each of these would either be a patriarch or one of the leaders. And notice going across, almost definitely the one in white is most likely going to be one from that tradition, possibly from North Africa. So even across cultures, there's going to be a variation of the Eastern churches. So we see the ones in black with their purple, the one in white. I should have got the details for the picture, but I just grabbed the snapshot just to give you the glance that all of these are in full communion. They are not orthodoxies we're looking on. They are Eastern Catholic churches. Let me put this down and see if in the chat, welcome to those who came in. We have a few more persons. Sorry if you had put a question in the chat, and I'm just looking at them. Okay, full communion means we are partake of the body and blood. Full communions means we partake of the body and blood of Christ. Yes, that's what it means, that we understand all of these, understand the Eucharist to be the body and blood of Christ, literally in the same sense that we hold it to be, in that sense. Just double checking any of the responses in the chat. If you wish to ask, you can put it in the chat if you don't need to vocalize. Lincoln, yes, your question. And then any other questions? Anybody?
My observation is that the present Pope must be a little bit concerned in terms of his authority. When you speak of the schism and the breakaway, you think he's concerned about that now? When you speak of
Yeah,
schism,
so let me answer that. There has been a opening and dialogue with both the Orthodox churches over the centuries, and you'll see from John Paul all the way to Pope Francis, with them attending and participating services with those who are in schism with us. Yes, Lincoln. So it has been a concern. It's never been you're over there, we're over here, and we have nothing to do with you. It's quite the opposite. That successive popes have actually had dialogue and celebrations when they attend in that particular country with the separated present. So yes, the answer is they have been concerned and continue to be concerned. Does that help?
yeah, man, thank you.
Right. So it is a concern that has had. Yes, Althea, and I'll just grab the register since we are now up to the full complement. Please go ahead, Althea.
Do any of these rites, do the priests marry like the Orthodox?
So that question was raised last week, so I wanted to make sure I double checked and did my homework to give the clarification, because I know the answer can sound just moderately confusing because it is not as clear cut as it sounds when you speak about it. So the answer is yes, the Eastern churches, if the candidate, the novitiate, is interested to be married, can marry before they are ordained. Notice the language, before. So if they are ordained to be a priest in the Eastern Church, they are ordained as married. They having been ordained, so if a single man is not married, gets ordained as a priest, he cannot marry after being ordained. So he has to remain celibate, etc., etc., etc. There's a further point that I know I wanted to clarify because it was raised last time and it needed clarification. Those who enter from that route are not selected as bishops. So let me say it in the positive. Bishops for the Eastern Church are only selected from those who are celibate, monks, and those persons who are unmarried and priests. So if somebody comes in married, they understand that they'll never become bishops and will not be elevated because only celibate bishops are, quote unquote, accepted in the Eastern churches. So, yes, we do know the practice of marriage is actually a discipline in the Latin rite and not a law. That's documented. Does that help for those who heard the question last week and those who are asking the question for this week?
I'm fine, Bess. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Good. So it's a general question because people have the information, but please notice how gingerly I'm making the differentiations so that persons, when they repeat it, do not misrepresent the position. If the person is married before ordination, they can be married as a married priest. After a single man is ordained, he cannot get married, and it's understood he plans to be celibate, and he plans to open himself to be selected as a bishop. That's the Eastern Rite. Now, please understand two more things, and this one has caused... I want to take this one humbly, please. There have been times in the journey of the Catholic Church where groups of Christians from one of the other church that is separated from us come over in a block, meaning a whole church community comes over, the pastor of the church as well as the whole of the community with that pastor. There are those two exception cases that a right has been afforded to a Anglican group who came over, and hence there is a Anglo-Catholic rite. And it is because the complete church community, not one single individual, came over. And hence, so you may encounter that priest. I have seen him at least in 2 videos that we've used, him talking about purgatory, and he has a very, very strong ministry praying for the faithful departed. I mean, he said that's a calling that he has. And in the introductory remarks, you will hear him speaking about his conversion from the Anglican Church into the Catholic Church. And he actually was, at the time, married in the Anglican Church and came over into the Catholic Church. I'm telling you all this because you may buck it up at some point in time and go like, how come? So that is the Anglo-Catholic rite, which was established for a collective block of persons who came over and converted to the Catholic Church. And they were given this rite that they participate in within the Latin rite of the Church. They're not Eastern. They are Latin rite.
Which is Western.
Correct. Absolutely Western.
So my question here, Sir Noel.
Yes. Remember now, I'm the only the messenger, so don't shoot the messenger.
Don't worry, I won't hold you guilty.
Go ahead.
Are you saying therefore that should I put it this way then? Is there any contemplation, any discussion about changing that for the Western, the Latin people?
No. There isn't a consideration. As far as I know.
Okay.
As you can take careful note, my travels to Rome are only in my dreams, so I'm not up to date on the actual physical activities, but the literature that has come out, and by all means, everybody, do be very, very, very mindful. We had a long series at the start of Pope Leo's, when he began pontificate, of material that is out there in videos,
Public domain.
some of them referring to one of them I know repeatedly is called Pope Leo's Reflections or Pope Leo's it. Please click on the um the segment that explains what the people are who are posted that online. Click on it, look on their own explanations as to what they're doing. Somebody sent me one recently about the Pope making these changes, and it was a fantastic, wonderful, as far as the person was concerned, and that was supposed to have happened in secret, and the Pope hasn't released it to everybody yet. Again, when you look on the description on the website, it says, this is for pure spiritual entertainment. The things described are fictional, are not reflective of Pope Leo or any of Pope Leo's. It explicitly states, and people are watching these videos, and of course they end up coming to me, and unfortunately they get one additional click on them because I now have to watch the video to see and explain how authentic is what being presented in the video and help to give an explanation. So everybody, and these things are circulating, as you all know, that one wonderful Catholic gets it and says, oh, this is so wonderful, let me send it. Just be mindful, anything that has urgent, shocking, anything that is in these big
Be
bold prints
careful.
that says click it so that you watch it, it's not going to lead you to some sinister link. It's a material that is fictional. Somebody has created an AI video in many cases using Pope Leo's images and saying, wouldn't it be nice if the Pope changed all of these things in the church? And that's what that video was saying. That we all would be better off if the Pope changed a number of things in. And clearly, I simply went, there are official websites, I'll post in the link associated with the Vatican that establishes, and of course the person is going to me say, but Mr. Wilkins, this was done in secret, you don't expect it to see it on the Vatican site. And my response is, it can't be credible, it can't be authentic. Converted could only do that if they were widowed. Correct. So Winsome has pointed out to me, yes, thank you for reminding to make that comment. So that particular priest spoke about his conversion experience. Thanks for that wisdom, Winsome. And he also spoke about what happened to his children and his grandchildren in his conversion experience. So you're going like, this guy is a Catholic priest. He has children and grandchildren. And in the case in point, of course, he did say that his wife had died. So, but if you watch and hear him talking about his conversion experience, you're going to hear him being married with children and grandchildren and being a Catholic priest. So thanks for that, Winsome. Yes, Aldo?
No, but you should also point out that in the Eastern Church, our communion, our conversation with them, they are individual church, they are autonomous.
Yes.
So the church in Ukraine is not united to the church in Russia or Albania. They are autonomous church.
In that sense. And
yes, in that sense.
And
yes,
united with the Pope in Rome.
Yes.
So again, an example of that, in our own island, we have 3 dioceses and we have an archbishop and 2 bishops. Archbishop doesn't have the responsibility to go over into Mandeville or Montego Bay and give directives, even though he's an archbishop. They are actually 3 quote-unquote autonomous equals of their diocese. So even though we hear the term being an archdiocese, the geographical location is the archdiocese and he's the archbishop. And I don't mean specifically the current archbishop, because in our history we've actually had a number of archbishops who were here who actually were bishops or overseers for that diocese. And of course, the irony is when Archbishop DeFore Emeritus went to Mandeville, Mandeville didn't become an archdiocese because he's an archbishop. He was actually an apostolic administrator of the Diocese of Mandeville. So the point that I'm making is, just as the three bishops in our diocese are autonomous, individual, no one of them accounts to the other one in the sense that you are my boss, so to speak. There are three equals, though one is an archbishop and the other two bishops, one right now because we're sharing Bishop Persad between Montego Bay and Mandeville. So too, those churches who are the Catholic churches in Ukraine, in each of the Eastern churches, each of them is autonomous from the other one, even though they're all Byzantine and they all belong to the same collective of the Catholic Church. And what they have in common is they all accept. Now, there is at least two or three of them who, quote unquote, separated from the church in the early centuries and have reunited since, and hence have now come back in the fold, if you want to say it like that. Thanks for that, Alda.
I don't think,
Yes.
No, I don't think. The other point I was making is the Eastern Orthodox Church.
Yes.
They too autonomous.
So
the church,
correct.
Yes.
Correct.
The
So
church
each of the Eastern
is-
churches has their own individual patriarch, and they're
Yes,
separate. Yeah. And
Yes.
politically speaking, there was a little bit of problem since the start of the
Ukraine.
war between the
Ukraine
Russian
and
Orthodox
Russia
and the
and Ukraine.
Ukrainian Orthodox. There
Yes,
was some serious tension
yes,
in
between
that
them.
relationship because of the war.
War.
Yes, Joan. Thanks, Aldo.
Yeah. Noel,
Yes.
earlier, thank you. Earlier, you said that whole communities of the Anglican Church come over to the Catholic, and so we have the Anglo-Catholic rite. I am wondering to know, in the Anglo-Catholic rite, which form of worship do they follow? Is it the Byzantine liturgy or the Roman
Latin.
rite Holy Mass, which we follow? Which do they?
They follow the Latin rite because they are under the Latin group of rites. So just like the St. Ambrosian, they are under the Latin rite. So they're under Latin, not a Byzantine rite.
So they're just like us.
They are just like us.
Thank you.
I'm just saying it because people may encounter the information in doing some search or something, and I just want to clarify that it does exist. It's not the norm. It's not saying every Anglican that comes over, they come over and they can go to the Latin, right? It's an exception rule that did occur and did exist. Yes, Gillian. Any other questions? But still you have high Anglican.
Question.
Yes.
Hello.
Hold on, Leslie. Yes, Gillian.
Yes, so good evening, Brother
Welcome.
Noel. Good evening, everybody. Just an observation, though,
Sure.
that the Eastern Catholic, most of them were in the USSR, and I was wondering if at any point they were united. Just asking.
They were united with the Orthodox, or they were united? So the answer would be no. They were not united.
No. Okay.
And here's the reason why. We're talking about their existence predating. These churches predate the Russian USSR conglomerate. So this is going back to 700s, 600s. And they've always been there as early. And that's why the Pope's quote about these Eastern churches is they're not recent inventions. They're not like since the last 600 years. They trace back all the way back to an early apostle or a disciple of an apostle who went preached to these territories and established that church. And that church was not, quote unquote, simply an Orthodox church. It was, quote unquote, a Catholic church. And then when the Orthodox break off, you now would now have the two separate entities coexisting, so to speak, within a geographical location. So they always existed even before the Russian. Now, what we do find is there have been periods of persecution of these churches, both in the early times and later on. Yes, Everett. Thanks for that, Gillian. Let me just check.
Excuse me.
Yes, Everett.
Yeah, you did say that the Western Church include North Africa,
No, not
which
the whole of North Africa. So thanks if you want it, if you said that. Go ahead.
what about the southern part of Africa? Bishop the Rites.
I don't know. The material I had watched and read indicated because of the historical developments in the later centuries when we start to talk about. So we're not talking about the first 600-700 years of Christianity. The later developments have also influenced. So the fact that now later on in the centuries, you have the different travelers going down and bringing quote unquote Christianity to the southern part of the African continent. You find that the influence was a little different. So I will answer, I do not know as far as the first 600 years of Christianity. My research, I had not seen the southern part of the western part of Africa and the southern part of Africa. How impactful was the early development of Christianity? What I do know is the impact on the northern and the eastern side, which obviously is much closer to the birthplace of Christianity, which is Jerusalem. So, as I said, what I do know about is the later periods when you had the Portuguese going down to travel, and when they're traveling now, they're now ended up in some of these regions. What we do know in that one regard is on the other side, that when Christianity arrives much later to some places in India, they already found a long tradition of Christianity there because of guys like Thomas and so forth. So, homework for me, Everett, to see
As
about.
usual.
Now, I'd actually attempted to look it up when I was doing the other research that I was doing because I wanted to establish the likelihood of the Ethiopian version of the Bible crossing over to the western side of Africa as a means for which their Bible moved across Africa. And when I done that research, the information really was pointing me to the later centuries in the history of Christianity, and not that earlier first 600, 700 years as far as the influence. I can do the research and see if I can come back and bring that up when I do a July series. So I'll research that. If anybody is in here who is knowledgeable on it, please feel free to share, if anybody.
You
Right.
ready for my question now?
Yes, sir, Leslie. So Everett, I'll follow up on that.
One Leslie after the other. All right. My question now. Are you saying that if a Pentecostal church, the pastor and his whole flock decides to come over, we will accept him?
So let's see if I answer you in two ways. That did occur. So we know Deacon Alex Jones of blessed memory, when he converted to Catholicism, he brought over his whole, at the time, one of those churches in that tradition. And he, in his conversion, brought them over and they all converted to the Roman Rite. So in that case, no, they didn't allow. And there, in my view, are more significant differences in the theologies in that context than those, for example, the Anglican Church, where, as pointed out earlier on, there are high Anglicans who their perspective is much, 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 much closer to the Catholic
Yes, I agree.
perspective with the high Anglicans. So
And that's why I said Pentecostal, because I want
no, they're pretty much in the opposite direction.
So are
Many of
you
them.
saying they did not accept him?
So the Pentecostals
Yes.
converted completely to the Roman rite of the Catholic Church. There was
Yes.
no dispensation given to them. So I'm saying I know of at least one case where the whole church came over and they converted whole and soul to our version of Catholicism.
So that means that they are Roman Catholics now?
That is 100% correct.
Okay, good.
So that's Deacon Alex Jones of blessed memory. That was his conversion journey. And let me just spend 2 seconds on this and just say why I said that. So Deacon Alex Jones was in one of those churches, and he had a particular inclination towards liturgy, just straight. And he said to his church community, since they are free to choose and do what they're doing, separate from their mother churches, so to speak, he wanted them to worship as authentically as the early church worshipped. So he was going to do the research and go back to the early church and see what the early church did, what they practiced, and did a whole heap of studying. And he would come back to his church and do presentations to him, and his congregation was quite happy and liking where he was going with it, and they were doing what he understood the early church. And he, in giving his conversion experience, actually said at some point in time, some of his more discerning congregation got to him, put him down one side and says, "Look, Pastor, the more you're going is the more you're beginning to look like the church down the road." And they were saying, like the Catholic Church down the road, be careful where you're taking us. And he said, that group of people actually decided to separate. And when he decided that he was going to become Catholic, because he now realized that whatever liturgical practices he had researched was coming very, very close to what the liturgical practices were in the Catholic Church. So that's Deacon Alex Jones of blessed memory. He passed on. You can see his conversion experience and his church community.
He came to Jamaica, remember?
He came to Jamaica before he passed away. And he actually went and visited, the church in St. Thomas when he came, because it had special. So Ethiopia is widely considered the first country mentioned in the book of Genesis. Yeah, that's true. And it's mentioned about 38 times in the Old Testament.
I'm sorry, Noel. I had to
Yeah, man.
note that precisely because you mentioned that you knew nothing about. I
Now,
hope I'm not getting it
go slow
wrong.
with what you're saying now. So please remember now, Judaism coming to Ethiopia does not automatically mean it's Christian. I'll say it again. Judaism coming to Ethiopia does not automatically mean Christianity. So there's a long tradition
I wasn't considering that at all.
But I'm giving you the clarification as you speak about it. So there's a long tradition in Ethiopia where their Queen of Sheba traveled to King Solomon, mated with him, and brought back a child, and that was Melchizedek the first. And they traced their Jewish tradition through all the way back to King Solomon in Ethiopia in their document, the Kaib Negras. However, when they trace Christianity's arrival in Ethiopia, it is not until the 3rd or 4th century that their Ethiopian, so even though we hear about the Ethiopian eunuch of Candace, which was in the 1st century, coming to meeting Philip and coming back, their actual historical documents trace that Christianity arrives much later than the early part of Christianity. So that's why I know I mentioned it. Deacon Arthur and Arlene, and 8 o'clock is upon us. Thank you. Yes, Deacon Arthur. You want to let Arlene go first, Deacon? Because I know yours going to be more involved. Arlene.
No.
Arlene? Arlene, step up, please.
No, I know I'm not speaking. Sorry.
All right. Yes, Deacon Arthur. So welcome, Deacon Arthur Taylor.
All right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was trying to get back. I had some technical issues.
Yeah, man, muting and unmuting. Yes.
I was trying to let you know that was not where I was coming from at all. Where I was coming from is that the wise men visiting baby Jesus, one of those men was from Ethiopia. And there are several places where we read that some of the apostles were following Jesus, or those who followed Jesus were from Ethiopia and other countries southward of Kush.
Correct.
So there is absolutely no reason why there is an approach that seemed to be taken that Christianity was flowing from Europe when it really came from Africa.
Right. So
And that's a fact.
here's the point now. You are going back ways to
You
make a
think so?
statement. Wait, that we are saying it came from Europe to Africa. And my point is the flow is from Jerusalem to Africa, not from Europe. And we know that because Ethiopia has never been in, wait, Marcio. Ethiopia has never been influenced by European Christianity. That's a statement of history. Ethiopia has never been conquered, has never been influenced by. They had a greater danger of the Muslims attacking and affecting them over European. So that's a historical fact. I don't know. I see these videos and I'm going like, where are the videos coming from if we know historically that Europe never influenced Ethiopia when it comes to Christianity? That's a historical fact. So I'm saying whoever is putting the videos are starting at a conclusion which is not historically true.
Yeah.
Whoever puts out those videos are starting from a conclusion that people believe Christianity came from Europe to Ethiopia. And that's not a historic. It's historically known. Europe never, ever, ever, ever came and did that influence in any meaningful way. As a matter of fact, it's the 1600s before we hear of an actual historical reference of some European coming there. And this is in the 1600s. So I'm saying the statement assumes a statement which is not a historical observation. People put up a dartboard and start throwing darts at something that isn't there. So no claim I know is made of Europe bringing Christianity. And we hear about all the early church fathers who come from North Africa. They come from and influence Christianity. I saw the video, Marcio. That's why I took the answer the way I answer. Thanks. Deacon.
You talk about Alex Jones, Reverend Deacon.
Yes, I think
I have had the glorious opportunity to have met him.
Yes, when he came.
Yes, when he came.
Yes.
To a crusade celebration at Holy Rosary.
Yes.
Yes, where the good Reverend Walter Dorsey at the time, you know.
That's right.
And of course, you're right in terms of his conversion. And I've heard of others who, after studying theology, going back to the early church, early centuries of theology, have really changed. Even with the Adventists, some of those Adventist theologians, they have that kind of challenge right now, even in the Adventist church. A lot of time why people don't make the change is the Adventist pastors who tends to be keeping Adventism very much alive, because the theologians have realized that there's some authentic truth that is there in the early century. One of the challenges with some of the Christian communities is that they start their theology somewhere around Irenaeus, and probably in the 2nd century going on there, you know.
Yes.
That's one of their challenge, and so they ignore the authenticity of the church beginning in Rome, in Jerusalem in those early years, and the councils coming down. They refused to acknowledge the Catholic Church in that spread, you know. But just to say that those who came over with Alex Jones, with Deacon, would have gone through a converting experiences, because you know the Pentecostals have the doctrine is
Different.
different from us.
Yes,
So
severely different.
they would have to go through the kind of baptismal rites and all those kind of things that we have in the Latin Rite Church. You know, so they had to go through that kind of experience.
Thanks, Deacon. So let me just show the one more slide. I think it may help to continue that thought, which is a point that I was making. So just 2 minutes more on this, which is a part of the thought. So the Alexandrian, which is what we're just discussing a while ago, liturgy, comes to us via the association of St. Mark, is associated with the Coptic Church. Coptic now, remember, is the Egyptian church. And they would have had their own language in there. So St. Mark, there's a church attributed to him in Egypt, and Coptic, Egypt, interchangeable terms. Coptic is the Arabic and Greek word for Egyptian. We do know the Muslim invasion in 641. They then separated, and at the Council of Chalcedon, what we have had, and this is one of the churches that's pointing out, that there was some amount of missionary work, and over the centuries, this didn't happen quickly, that they came back in communion with the church in Rome. So there was a period that they had separated from the Council of Chalcedon in the 400s. In here, that we do see that they're quote unquote, it's most likely the challenge of the Monophysite principle, which is for a different discussion. But they have, today, there exists the Egyptian Coptic Rite, which is Orthodox, and the Coptic Rite that is loyal to the church in Rome as well. And again, we do see here, again, the Ge'ez, and that's the language we now see. In Ethiopia, is also associated with the Coptic Rite. Missionaries from Alexandria spread the faith in Ethiopia in the 4th century. Alexandria, Egypt. The native language they use is Ge'ez, and was used instead of Greek, because Greek, of course, had been the standard language throughout. The reason, because of Alexander the Great and his influence. The church in Ethiopia also separated at the Council of Chalcedon, but was brought back again through efforts, and that's a recent reunification. And that reunification was in the 1960s. So for a number of hundreds of years, the church in Ethiopia, because of the Monophysite controversy in the 400s, actually separated, but there is now the church in Ethiopia, which is in full communion, which again is separate from the other communities and the other churches. Last two, the Syriac, and this covers a large region. I have emailed out the notes. Again, they had and used their language, which is similar to the Aramaic tongue that Jesus spoke. And their region was also, quote unquote, a long-standing tradition of Christianity, and they too separated because of the issues at the Council of Chalcedon. And this is where they separated between the East and the West. So, again, this is again one of those churches that I'm pointing out that had been separated. I mentioned this earlier, and their reunification has been in recent history. Recent history here in 1781. I call that recent compared to the other churches that have been in union all the way. So, a number of these churches have had periods where, because of theological grounds, coming out of the Council of Chalcedon, separated, and over the centuries have actually been reunited with the church. So the notes have been sent out already. Please take your time and see as best. The Turk community in India has a long history of being associated with doubting Thomas. And again, so please, and not running you down to 8:30. That's in a nutshell a very, very, very involved presentation. And I again apologize. I'm not a history buff, and I will pick up Christianity first took root in Africa in the first century, primarily in Egypt, especially Alexandria and the ancient region. Please put your source whenever you're posting something that is a piece of text. Just post your
The
source.
source is there. All the
And not,
sources from
no, no, no,
BBC.
no. Where the source is from. It only tells
BBC.
me. Say again?
It's BBC documentary,
I
British
don't see
Broadcast
BBC. I
Corporation.
don't see BBC listed
It's
there.
there. Yeah, man.
I'm saying I don't see it. I'm saying I don't see it. It's not there.
Okay, I put it there.
Thank
It's
you.
there.
Okay, so thanks, Marcio. Each of this, I ask people to spend some time looking over the question that is to be taken from this is to appreciate that when we speak about the Catholic Church, we are the Roman Rite in addition to the other 23 rites, which are the full conglomerate of the Catholic Church. The challenge that we have is many times that because the Roman Rite is significantly larger in population, many times the thinking is that the Roman Rite is the only, but we belong to a communion, and in the communion, there are differences in culture, differences in language, etc., etc., etc. And these churches are in communion with us. Quickly, next week we have Mrs. Lee coming back, and she's going to be doing the final leg of the creed. She's been doing one each month so far, and she's going to be doing one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. In July, we're going to be doing my annual presentations on the 7 deuterocanonical books that are in the Catholic Bible. So please, we're going to again take a snapshot look over the weeks in July at each of an overview of the 7 books that's in our Catholic Bible, that's not in the 66 Bible, and some of the background, some of the scriptures. So it's not going to be a verse by verse by verse by verse study. It's an overview. So you can encourage, I'll put out the notice, persons who are interested in the question is why the significant difference in our Catholic Bible as against Bibles that are 66 or a King James Bible. We'll again be looking at that in the month of July, and I will end with obviously my favorite topic, which is the books of the Maccabees. So we will have a session on the Maccabees at the end, which is my area of strength. So please, we look forward next week. We go back and look on completing the creed. The notes will be sent out, and then throughout the month of July, Deuterocanonicals, some people call it Apocrypha. We'll be looking on those questions of those books that didn't make it into the Bible and why ours were and accepted. Exactly. Yes. Saint Athanasius, who is a recognized Catholic saint, so you're pointing to the very same thing. And Ossia of Hippo is who the Augustinians come from, and our present Pope is an Augustinian from St. Augustine. Thank you for those. Marcio, thanks for confirming the very point that I'm making. Deacon, I see you're present. Dario, I hope I'm
Hi,
not taking you off guard. Thank you all for being here, especially anybody who wasn't here for a little while. Welcome back to
Yes,
the clan.
Glenn,
Thanks, Joe.
brother
Deacon,
Glenn, not to draw me out.
for good reason. Chantel, good to see you on. I just asked about you about 2 weeks ago. I didn't see you in the register. Good to see you present. And I'm calling out the people who every once in a while I'd see them on and not here. So welcome back. Welcome, Deacon Glenn. Deacon, please take it out with the usual blessing. Latoya, good to see you on again. We're not missing anybody else. Deacon, all
Lord,
yours.
let us pray. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May the Almighty God bless you. Father, Son,
Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life.
Thanks be to
Thanks
God.
be to God.
God.
Yes, thanks.
So thank you all. We do have a number